And welcome, everyone, to our Week 10 edition of our All Cardinals podcast. I'm Howard Balzer. Donnie Druin is here. Millard Thomas is here. But I have to mention that Alex Weiner is not here. So I want to refute some rumors that are out there about Alex, because when it was heard that he wouldn't be on this podcast, there were all kinds of rumors going on that he could not practice because he got injured carrying his computer to his car, and that he also sprained a wrist on his keyboard. So he was also on the injured list along with so many Cardinals. But I want to refute that rumor. Alex is healthy. There's no injuries with him. But we do know, guys, that in the wake of this win over the 49ers Sunday, as we're now a few days away from the Week 10 game against Carolina, an injury list for the Cardinals that almost has no end. And we can see on this Wednesday today, as we record this, we know why the Cardinals didn't practice, because they didn't have enough players to practice. That's where it's gotten for this team. And yet, even amid it all, they keep winning.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you can try to sum up the Cardinals in one word, at least this year, I think resilience is probably the word that comes to mind. I mean, these guys have been through so much already, whether it be just injuries, COVID protocols, whatever it might be. I mean, they've overcome almost every single obstacle thrown at them, and doing so in very, very high fashion. I mean, let's not forget, this team almost strolled into similar levels of missing players like it did in Cleveland, mollywopped a very good Cleveland Browns team, and then this past week missing a handful of key players, including quarterback Kyler Murray, and somehow still put up 31 points. I mean, it absolutely incredible. I think it's a tribute to the coaching staff and their ability to get players ready, even though three of the assistant coaches were also missing from, the game in San Francisco. So overall, I mean, the Cardinals are 8-1 right now. They have the best record in the AFC, the NFC, the only team with one loss still attached to their name. Realistically, they probably should be undefeated right now. But I think if you're an Arizona Cardinal fan, there's not a whole lot of complaining you can do at the moment.
Yeah, those apology forms for Cliff Kingsbury are being typed up as we speak, because like you said, he didn't even have assistant coaches to help him out. Like, that was a coaching clinic by Cliff Kingsbury on Sunday. And when you just juxtapose this season with last year, it was like when Kyler Murray kind of banged up his shoulder, like this team kind of went to a tailspin. Now this team is playing the 49ers, who we kind of had expectations for entering the season, and they just destroyed them without a Kyler Murray, without a DeAndre Hopkins. You lose Chase Edmonds on like the first drive of the game. Like, you lost a couple offensive linemen. Like, this team was battered Sunday. Offense, defense, coaching, up and down the roster. They had injuries, people, players, coaches out, and it didn't matter. This team stepped up to the plate once again and destroyed this 49ers team on Sunday.
It's interesting you mentioned the coaches, because I was just thinking of that as the Cleveland game was referenced, because in talking to Cliff this week on Monday after the game, and then today, there's been so many other players to ask about in terms of injuries. We forgot to even ask about the assistant coaches, especially Jeff Rogers, who's the special teams coordinator and is also assistant head coach. So he's a guy on the sideline that helps Kingsbury a lot of times during games with game management, with certain strategies, with challenge flags and timeouts, things like that. Now, in the game Sunday, really didn't need it all that much, but the fact remains he wasn't there, along with two other coaches, and we're not even sure of their status, whether they'll be back in time for the Carolina game. But it's just been that kind of crazy season, dating all the way back to week 1 when you think about it, when Kelvin Beachum went out at halftime with an injury to his ribs. And there's a story on AllCardinals.com this week with a little chart of all the snaps from the offensive linemen they've had. And normally when you have an offense that has a lot of shuffling going on the offensive line, it's very difficult to be productive on offense. And yet the Cardinals still have, with an offensive line that has had 6 different starting combinations in 9 games. And during 5 of those games, whoever started, they lost guys during the game, 1 or 2. And last week was another one with 2, and they don't miss a beat. Guy comes off the bench, boom, they just keep moving the football. So it's a testament to everybody on this team, leadership, head coaching, assistant coaching, whatever it is, that this team has played at the level it is. And before we go on, I did want to mention one thing that the comment was made, they could rightfully be undefeated. Of course, we also know if a guy kicked the field goal in week 2, they would have lost to the Vikings. So sometimes those things even out. But the reality is they're 8-1. And Millard, in terms of apologies to Cliff Kingsbury, I don't know if a lot of people haven't noticed this. His overall record now in the NFL in 2 seasons and 9 games, he's over 500 now, 21, 19, and 1. So he's certainly answering a lot of the critics that are out there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And as you're talking, I'm actually looking up Kyle Shanahan's head coaching record because I think for his career, I think Kyle Shanahan's like right around 500, or he might be even below it. Like what Cliff Kingsbury's doing, right now, I think Kyle Shanahan is 32-40 as an NFL head coach. So Cliff Kingsbury, he's got right now, it's Sean McVay in the NFC West, and then it's Cliff Kingsbury, and he's making a case to maybe overtake a Sean McVay. Like, we need a larger sample size. We got to see what this team does in the postseason, how the offense looks when Kyler gets back and this team gets healthy. But right now, Cliff Kingsbury is making a very, very strong case for Coach of the Year, and it might just come down to him and a Sean Payne, a couple other guys in the NFL.
And before you jump in, Donnie, everyone's talked about, could Kyler be MVP? Could Cliff be head coach of the year, or coach of the year, I should say? And certainly those things are to be decided, after a lot more games. But I'll tell you, when you look at a guy like James Conner, they signed James Conner when they did it. 1 year, $1.75 million. Okay, we'll see what happens. And Colt McCoy, everyone looked at that and figured, okay, yeah, veteran behind Kyler Murray, that'll be nice. But does anybody believe that Chris Streveler would have been able to do anything close to what Colt McCoy did in that game against the 49ers? If they had kept Brett Hundley instead, would he have been able to do what he did? So I think almost every move that Steve Keim has made this offseason, maybe with the exception of Malcolm Butler, and that was out of his total control because he just decided to retire. Virtually everything, free agents, big signings, minor signings, draft choices like Rondale Moore, everything has worked out perfectly. And if this team goes, whatever they win, whether it's 11, 12, 13 games, whatever it ends up might be in, I think Steve Keim should be right there in the discussion for Executive of the Year.
No, I absolutely agree. And to your point about Malcolm Butler, I mean, we've seen these young cornerbacks step up even after, he decided to part ways with the team, at least for now. Who's to say that Butler didn't at least help them a little bit on and off the field, So even his short presence in Arizona, during their training camp might have paid more dividends than we might be led to believe. But I mean, it's funny because we heard consistently throughout training camp, throughout preseason, even through the early stages of the regular season, they went into last offseason wanting to bring in veteran guys who could A, contribute, and B, boost up the locker room. And I think every single guy, to your point, Howard, has done both. Has like bananas. We're talking about Colt McCoy leading a 30-point effort on the road against a divisional rival to push the Cardinals to 8-1, which is absolutely phenomenal. Every other signing they've had, every other draft choice they've had has made contributions to this point. So yeah, I think a lot of people aren't willing to give Steve Keim a lot of credit. And, sometimes understandably so, because a lot of his draft choices haven't exactly hit. But at least from the last 12 months up until now, yeah, give the man his respect, give the man his flowers, because he certainly deserves it up until this point.
Yeah, and one other player that I want to give credit to for Steve Keim is Marcus Golden, who terrorized that game on Sunday. 3 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits. He's now tied for 3rd in the NFL with 9 sacks and leads the league with 4 forced fumbles. Like, this dude was acquired for a 6th-round pick at last year's deadline. Absolute steal by Steve Keim in that front office.
Great point. And he's also, there's a lot of guys that you could argue are the heart and soul of this team, with personality, leadership, and all that. Marcus Golden truly is, just with the way he approaches the game, his passion for it. We can see it. He'll talk to us in media sessions, maybe not every week, but every other week, whatever it might be. And you can just see the passion exuding from him just when he talks to us, much less what he probably is like in the locker room, on the sideline, and all those things. So yeah, that was a master stroke. And look at this too. That's 2 years in a row now that Steve Keim has made a trade just before the trading deadline and given up hardly anything. Marcus Golden last year, Zach Ertz this year, who is certainly going to continue to be a big impact down the road. And with the draft choices, I mentioned Rondale Moore earlier, but how about Marco Wilson, a fourth-round pick? And you were alluding to it, Donnie, with things that Malcolm Butler might have helped when he was here with his experience and being a veteran. But Marco Wilson has come in from day one and just competed, played hard. Like I said, fourth-round draft pick. You're thinking, how could this guy last till the fourth round and be playing at the level he is right now? He's playing virtually every snap, every game, and he's out there on the island most of the time. And the guy's just playing tremendous football. So it's been pretty amazing. As I wrote Sunday after this game, and with all the injuries, all the things that were affecting them going into this game, not without your quarterback, without your top two receivers, and whatever else you want to talk about. I mean, Tanner Vallejo started at inside linebacker, and Zaven Collins didn't. Heck, that's another one we forgot to ask. He only played 3 snaps again. We thought he might not be active because of his shoulder injury, but played only 3 snaps. But with Marco Wilson, a fourth-round pick, I mean, that's come up huge. And so many, and the one guy we hardly ever talk about is Matt Prater. I mean, the guy's just money. You put him out there, and he's money. And that was
long distances too.
Yeah, exactly,
crazy.
Exactly. Another free agent addition that has been tremendous. So yeah, it's been. So I started to say what I was right after all these things, and then they go out there and we're shaking our head and going, "How can this happen?" And my first line was, "Well, maybe we shouldn't be surprised anymore. This is what this team is. This is what they're made of. They don't miss a beat no matter who's out there. Maybe there'll come a time when it does catch up to them, but so far it obviously truly has not."
Yeah, and to your point, Howard, about Marco Wilson kind of evolving to a starter as a fourth-round pick, he didn't get the luxury of sitting. He didn't get the luxury of not learning by baptism by fire. He was thrown to the wolves from day one, and he has responded accordingly. And I think it's super easy to take a look at hindsight and say, man, like, how is this guy a fourth-round pick? X, Y, and Z, whatever. I think the Cardinals might have gotten one of the steals of the draft out of Marco Wilson if he keeps up his current pace of play.
Yeah, he has to be considered that right now because the defensive secondary for the Cardinals coming into the year, that was probably like the one position group that couldn't really see a path to like high level production, a high ceiling. Like all the other position groups, I was like, okay, there's a path there where I could see a really high ceiling. But the secondary after Byron Murphy Jr. and no more Malcolm Butler, I was pretty concerned entering the year. But Marco Wilson and what that team has been able to do, like week after week, they keep shutting down these receivers and doing a pretty good job in the passing game. Like they did a pretty good job this past Sunday against Jimmy G. They forced a couple of fumbles against George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk, two really good pass catchers. So this secondary has been really impressive this season, and that was not something I expected from the Cardinals. I thought the secondary was going to be maybe a weakness of this team, and it actually turned out to be a strength.
Yeah, we all wondered. There's no question, and it was a legitimate cause for concern, or at least wonder how it was going to be. And of course, one of the biggest questions was Robert Alford, who had been here on a big contract, didn't play it down in 2 seasons. Cardinals released him, brought him back on a minimum salary contract. He wanted to prove that he could still be productive and play. And here he is, 9 games, and he hasn't had an injury, has been healthy. I guess we got to knock on wood a little bit there. But that was certainly one of the big questions about him, is because you knew that he's a pretty good player. And now he's been out there, and that threesome of Murphy, Wilson, and Alford is pretty darn good. And except for the one game when Murphy and that's another one. There was the one game when Murphy and Wilson weren't able to play, and they plugged in Antonio Hamilton and Jace Whitaker, and they went out there and competed, and everybody still played a good game. So I kind of laugh sometimes, guys, at the whole quote next man up mentality. Not to say that it doesn't exist, because you have to have that as a team, and you have to say that when someone gets hurt. Obviously, there has to be a next man up, but usually there's a reason why the other guys that are coming up are backups. There's a reason they're not starting. But with this team, it doesn't seem to matter. It really doesn't. I mean, when you plug in a Sean Harlow at left guard in 2 different games and then played an entire game at center against Green Bay, when you're plugging in these guys and the team doesn't miss a beat, it's like I said, maybe we shouldn't be surprised anymore. That's just who this team is, what they are, and they're proving it on a week-to-week basis.
And look, there's going to be injuries every week. I mean, this is the NFL, and nobody goes unscathed throughout the course of the NFL season. All 32 teams at some point throughout the year experience some sort of injury. And even the 49ers, I mean, they've been plagued with injuries the last couple of years, and a lot of really talented guys have gone out for San Francisco. You know, they ended up getting a top 5 pick last year. Well, trading up into it, actually. Just not the best luck whenever it came to the injury bug. A whole lot of excuses were thrown for the 49ers, you know, whenever they weren't able to compete for X, Y, and Z, you know, whether it be last year or 2019. The Cardinals have had every excuse available for them. Everyone. I mean, you name it, they've ran into a problem with it. They haven't made excuses. Exactly like Howard said, the next man up mentality is more prevalent than ever in Arizona. And guys, they do their job. You know, 1 through 53, they do their job. And I think watching Hard Knocks, listening to Mike McCarthy, who led the Green Bay Packers to Super Bowl in 2010, he hammered down the point that it takes all 53 guys, to go make a push for the Super Bowl. Every single person on that roster. And that's what we're seeing right now. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. Everybody's stepping up. Everybody's playing really good football whenever they need to. And you know, the results show it.
No, the 49ers comparison is a great point, because if the Cardinals have played and performed the last 2 seasons like the 49ers have had with injuries, like this might be a different podcast what we have today after that game on Sunday. If Cliff had his team looking like the 49ers looked on Sunday, this might be a different podcast. We might be discussing, is Cliff Kingsbury going to USC or not? Because right now, Cliff, with all those injuries, he has outcoached teams and other coaches consistently week after week, and he's gone against some brilliant offensive minds with a Sean McVay, a Kyle Shanahan, all these gurus, quote unquote, but yet it's Cliff Kingsbury, the man who's been hated on his first 2 years in the NFL. Like maybe he just had to adjust like all these other rookies and young guys in the NFL. Maybe Cliff Kingsbury, a guy who's like the same age as like me, basically. Like Cliff Kingsbury is still in his early 30s, mid 30s. Like maybe he needed a little bit of time to adjust, mature, and get caught up to the NFL level, because you see what he's doing right now for this team. That game on Sunday, that game plan, it was super creative. It wasn't a conservative game plan, especially when you consider it was Colt McCoy with no Hopkins, Green, yada, yada, guy after guy being out. That game plan was crisp, it was clean, and it was creative. And I can't say the same for Kyle Shanahan's team, even though he's the quote-unquote guru.
So that was the game against the 49ers. Another double-digit win on the road for the Cardinals. Now they come home to play the Carolina Panthers, and home hasn't been as kind to the Cardinals as the road has been. Now, yes, they are 3-1, and we can make a case that they very easily could have won that game against the Packers. Just as we mentioned, they could have lost to the Vikings, but that was a close game. Packers was a close game. The first 49ers game was a close game that they won by a touchdown. And so for whatever reason, the games have been different when the Cardinals have been home, except for the one against Houston. But even that one, it took them a little while to get going. And finally, they just beat up on an undermanned team. Now, the Panthers, who were certainly undermanned on offense, without Sam Darnold, without a couple starters on the offensive line who went on injured reserve this week. Robbie Anderson, one of their best receivers, is banged up. They did get Christian McCaffrey back last week. But this is a pretty good defense with Hassan Reddick coming in, and who signed a 1-year deal after leaving the Cardinals, and he has 8.5 sacks. So I'm very interested to see how this goes for the Cardinals. And it was pretty interesting because on Tuesday, in a media availability, Christian Kirk was asked about adjustments that Cliff had made in the practice schedule, which he had kind of alluded to might be coming when he talked generally to us during the summer. And Christian Kirk talked about how he's eased up a bit. He's, even if it's just, missing some reps here or there, making things lighter. And he also then said, especially as we get closer to the bye and paying attention to recovery with 2 games left before the bye, which is pretty late. It's pretty late when you have your bye in, week 11, or actually, I guess that would be week 12. It'll be, right? Yeah, because this week's week 10, they play week 11. So really the bye is in week 12. That's pretty late for a bye. And so then we have Cliff Kingsbury asked about it earlier today before we had the injury report, and he talked about how Wednesday going a little lighter and all that, and how important that is. Last year Wednesdays were intense. Then, guys, we get the injury report, which on a day they don't practice just lists what players would have practiced if there was practice. And there's a whopping 12 players on there that did not practice or would not have practiced. And then 4 that were limited. And so you look at that and you go, well, no wonder they didn't practice. They didn't have enough players to practice. But as what happens seems to happen every week, and it happens with a lot of teams, is that you're not told everything that happens in a game on Sunday. And then when Wednesday rolls around, you see the injury report, you go, oh, I didn't know that this guy was hurt or that guy or whatever. Well, today, who are the new names? We see Budda Baker listed with a concussion and a knee injury. Rondale Moore listed with a neck and a concussion. We have Kelvin Beachum with a shin injury. He would have been limited. The one we knew about, of course, only because someone asked Kingsbury about on Monday, was Aaron Brewer, the long snapper, who suffered a broken arm. And Monday, Kingsbury said, probably a couple of weeks. Then today, when he admitted that he had a broken arm, he said, well, it's probably going to be several weeks. And the Cardinals signed a guy named Kyle Nelson to the practice squad today, a longtime long snapper, who I would assume will probably be the long snapper on Sunday. Then we had Jordan Phillips, who had come back from a back injury and played some pretty good football. He's on there with a groin injury. And then to me, the capper is, to show what's happening with this team, David Wells, player that most people out there probably haven't even heard of, tight end that was on the practice squad, signed to the active roster last week because Demetrius Harris was on COVID. That was one good news. He was activated from the list on Wednesday. But David Wells is signed to the roster, plays one snap on Sunday, and he suffered a hand injury and would not have practiced today. So 12 DNPs, 4 limited, and then Christian Kirk, of course, who admitted to everybody that he had hurt his thumb before his pass in the game against the 49ers, but he would have practiced fully. So the big question is going towards Sunday is how healthy. We know this team's not going to be totally healthy. We don't know if Kyler Murray's going to play, DeAndre Hopkins, some of the other guys who are already out, another 2 offensive linemen that got hurt in the game. Max Garcia aggravated his Achilles. Justin Pugh had a calf injury. So who knows what this is going to look like when they take the field at State Farm Stadium on Sunday, guys.
You know, I also want to point something out too in regards to Kyler Murray. Very interesting, and you actually noted this in one of your articles today, that last week whenever we talked to Kyler in the media room, he was very interested to see why everybody was looking at his ankle whenever he first walked in, and then
and said he was fine. I said, I'm fine.
Went on to say that he felt fine and he could play. He could play last week if needed. And then media talks to him today, and he feels leaps and bounds better. And man, it's such a significant difference. And it's like, okay, well, little gamesmanship there, I guess, if anything else. But I mean, just focusing on the Panthers injuries as well. I mean, the Panthers, their right tackle is the only offensive lineman on that starting 5 to play in the same position the entire year. They just put 2 more offensive linemen on injured reserve. Obviously, they got Christian McCaffrey back, which is a huge boost. We'll see what PJ Walker does. Hasn't really done anything at the NFL level. He did great at the XFL, but it's not even the same league, as this Cardinals defense, a very, very good Cardinals defense playing right now. And then, like Howard said before we were talking, I mean, this is a very good Carolina Panthers defense, and maybe the Cardinals might have been better off if Sam Darnold was playing.
Hey, Darnold might be in the XFL pretty soon if he keeps it up. So he better be careful. But yeah, Kyler Murray, I mean, it's easy to say he's going to be a key to this game because he's an elite quarterback. But when I'm looking at this Panthers schedule right now, and I'm worried that their defensive stats might be a little inflated because depending on how you feel about Kirk Cousins and Matt Ryan, the only really good quarterback they faced this year is Dak Prescott, and they gave up 36 points to him. They gave up 34 points to Kirk Cousins. Like when they have played good offenses, that defense can be had. looking up and down their schedule, they've beaten teams like the Jets and the Texans, and it's like, okay, of course you beat those teams. So I'm worried that their defense might actually be a little inflated, and they're currently 19th against the rush in terms of yards allowed. So this Cardinals team, after seeing what James Conner did on Sunday to that 49ers front seven, like, the Panthers are a team usually built through the front seven as well, but James Conner was on fire on Sunday. He rushed for over 90 yards. He had another 70 yards in the receiving game. So I want to see what he can do against this Panthers defense. And of course, we're talking about the next man up. I want to see Eno Benjamin, of course, ASU guy. We're going to be talking a little ASU after this pod, Donnie and I. So I want to see Eno Benjamin go off against the Panthers. He might only get maybe 5 to 8 carries in that game, but still, we saw him, what he can do when you give him that ball. He can truck somebody and run you over and hit his head on the goalpost. So I'm excited to see Eno Benjamin on Sunday.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see him too, and it was great to see him do what he did, and just feeling more a part of the team. I mean, even as improved as he is this year, earlier in the season, he was going through the whole inactive deal again because they usually only kept 3 running backs active, and Jonathan Ward was just frankly better on special teams. And Eno admitted that. He spoke to the media today and said the whole special teams thing was a little bit foreign to him. But that's what you have to do. If you're going to dress for games in the NFL as a 3rd or a 4th running back or a 5th receiver, whatever it is, you have to be good on special teams. And that's not just as a returner, that's as a cover guy and being able to get down the field and make tackles. And that was something that he had to understand and be with. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like, we don't know yet, but it doesn't seem like Jonathan Ward is coming back. It seemed like that was a pretty bad concussion that he experienced. And obviously they're going to be incredibly careful with that. But now seeing what Eno Benjamin did, it was a real plus. But as you start looking at special teams, they're probably going to have to bring up, because they didn't have any tryouts this week for running backs. They have Tavian Feaster on the practice squad, who was in training camp with them, was cut and brought back, and then cut and brought back again to the practice squad. I would think with Chase Edmonds out that he is going to be active for this game. And so he needs to come up big on special teams, because that point that you made, one of you made about all 53 guys. Well, granted, not all 53 guys dress, but the 46, 48 players that dress, most everybody plays in the game at some point. Most everybody plays. Sometimes the backup quarterback doesn't, whatever. But I mean, even offensive linemen that aren't starters will play 5 to 7 snaps on special teams. Well, if one of those snaps you miss a block and somebody blocks a kick, that can change a game. And same thing with cover teams on punts or kickoffs. Go out of your lane, make a mistake there, get a holding penalty on a return, whatever it might be, that can help change games. So that's somewhere where Feaster, if he's active, is going to have to contribute on special teams and, quote, as you guys said, do your job. And so this is a game that we know the Cardinals should win, but as we know in this league, we saw what happened with Dallas and Denver. We saw what happened with Jacksonville and Buffalo. And you've just got to go out there. And this team has done that for the most part. Go out there every week and treat every team as if they're the best in the league, because that's what you have to do, because anybody can jump up and bite you at any time.
Yeah, I feel like that might be the one thing that might halt the Cardinals. If anything, will be. I feel like it might be, things like complacency, overlooking guys. And the week to week, the NFL is such a drastically different league. I mean, the performances we see from one week to the next is unworldly sometimes. I mean, these guys truly remind you every Sunday that they're in the NFL for a reason. All of these coaches, all of these players, they're the best in the world, and you're, especially as an 8-1 team, especially with as many superstars on your team as you have, like the Arizona Cardinals, you're going to get everybody's best shot. You cannot afford to slip up mentally, overlook teams, start looking towards, certain playoff scenarios, which is exactly what that team did last year. Started off, very, very hot. Admittedly, so some of the guys on the team say, they started to kind of piece together some playoff scenarios that, should happen. We only need to win X amount of games, and this team needs to lose in order for us to clinch. That part doesn't concern me at all, because it really feels like the new leadership brought in from the offseason isn't going to allow that at all. But just in terms of a week-to-week playing the game and making sure you're focused on that specific goal. I imagine it's got to be a little bit tough to stay focused whenever you're 8-1, 10-1, 12-1, right? Because you're eventually steamrolling all of these teams, and it's like, okay, we need a challenge. The Dolphins aren't going to cut it, the Panthers are going to cut it, Texans are going to cut it. We need a challenge. We need to have Green Bay back in here for round 2. We want to face the 49ers or the Seahawks back here for round 3. Give us a good football team so we can go out and beat them.
Yeah, I'm putting trap game all over this one, not because I think the Cardinals are going to look over the Panthers or anything like that, because they're like one of the only, one of 3 teams in the NFL that seems to consistently show up week after week, like you're mentioning, Donnie. But I'm putting trap game written all over this is because the PJ Walker thing, that actually might be an upgrade because of how bad Darnold was playing. Like, he was just turning it over constantly in the red zone last week. And it just seems like the team might just be kind of done with him from the coaching staff. Matt Rule seems to be kind of upset with Darnold. I mean, Robbie Anderson was just tearing him a new one on the sideline, just shredding him apart and just yelling at him, honestly. So this could actually be a week where it actually ignites the Panthers benching Darnold, and I guess he's injured, so it's not really benching, but they probably would have considering his play. But this could actually be a launching point for the Panthers. And let's not forget, like, that 7th seed in the NFC is probably not going to be a very good team. And the Panthers at 4-5, like, it sounds disgusting, but they're in the mix along with the Falcons and a whole bunch of other mediocre teams. So the Panthers kind of need this one. They may not get it, but I think they're going to fight pretty hard on Sunday.
And I was going to mention that as we come close to wrapping up this All Cardinals podcast, because what Walker also does is he provides a different dimension to being able to escape and run, similar in a way to what Trey Lance did when the 49ers came in here and he ran for I think it was around 86 yards or something like that. So he was able to escape from trouble and make positive yardage. And without a couple of huge 4th down stops in that game, including that one from inside the 1-yard line where they got to Lance before he was able to get in, that game might have ended differently. And so that's the other dimension that Walker can bring. And so you just can't rush as hard. You can't rush the same with your Chandler Jones or Marcus Golden, whoever's in there on those particular plays, because you know that he can get outside you and hit somebody downfield or get some positive yards. And so you just have to play a little bit differently. I mean, he's not the most accurate passer in the world. He played earlier this year. I think he was 3 for 14. And so you got to be able to get the pressure on him and force him into mistakes in some respects, but don't let him get outside containment, because that's where sometimes big plays can happen. So I think that's the one thing this defense has to be mindful of, along with Christian McCaffrey also, in terms of not letting him wreck their game and come up with big plays. So those are the 2 wild cards to me in terms of that Panthers offense.
Absolutely. And I feel like McCaffrey is, going to get his touches no matter what, week in and week out. I mean,
right.
One of the more dynamic guys in the NFL, and for good reason. I mean, he's a phenomenal football player. The one thing that does scare me, and you 2 have already touched on it, so I'm not going to harp on this point. The Cardinals have been very lackluster in their gap integrity. Whenever something breaks down, there's not necessarily always that guy in whatever gap they're supposed to be in order to contain a runner, whether it be the running back or the quarterback. It's something Vance Joseph talks about almost every week, I feel like, is gap integrity, and how, if guys just, stick and be where they're supposed to be, they're not going to have problems. But I feel like week after week, a handful of really good running backs and good runners at the quarterback position take advantage of the Cardinals just, not being sound sometimes mentally on the defensive side of the football, especially in the front 7. And, let alone a guy who can take off from the pocket, a guy like PJ Walker. And Howard, you already alluded to it. I mean, the 86 rushing yards, he led both teams in rushing that game as well. And granted, he's not a Trey Lance type. I feel like Trey Lance, probably throws the football a little bit better than him. But still, and anytime something breaks down, everything else goes out the window. It just goes down to pure athleticism. PJ Walker is definitely an upgrade over Sam Darnold whenever it comes to that aspect.
Yeah, McCaffrey's going to have 100 yards from scrimmage. That's like almost guaranteed for that guy because they're just going to give him the ball like 20 to 30 times on Sunday, especially with Darnold out. But I think it's going to come down a lot to third down because the Panthers are a team that's not very good at third down, 26 in the league at only 35% at third down conversion. So with PJ Walker in, he's going to be looking to those safety blankets, DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey on third down. So the Cardinals can do a good job of bottling up those top 2 or 3 options that the Panthers like to go to. They have a great chance to win this game. And the Panthers on the defensive side, they're very good at stopping other teams at third down. 4th best conversion rate in the NFL. So if the Cardinals can keep the chains moving, we don't know if a Kyler Murray is going to be there. We don't know about the rest of their other receivers. It looks like Kirk is at least going to be there. But they can keep the chains moving on third down while stopping the Panthers on third down, bottling up McCaffrey, bottling up Moore and Robbie Anderson. I think that will be a good path to victory for the Cardinals.
Yeah, that's all true. And I think a lot of those games on the road, the Cardinals were able to get out to leads in a few of them. That takes away the running game a bit. And some of that is turnovers. I mean, last week against San Francisco, no turnovers for the Cardinals, 3 takeaways on defense. And those are the things when you do that, most of the time you're going to win. And so obviously that's what they're going to be trying to do. And the Cardinals, even in games where they give up yards, they're very good defensively on third down also. So the ingredients are there, but again, you just have to play this Panther team like just treat them as an excellent opponent and just play your best game. And then there shouldn't be any issues. So that all happens Sunday afternoon at State Farm Stadium. Cardinals 8-1, trying to stay a game ahead of the Rams in the division, and we'll see if they can keep it going. So that'll wrap up this edition of this All Cardinals podcast. Keep coming back to allcardinals.com for all the great content and all the stories and videos and podcasts and all those good things. So for Donnie Druin, Millard Thomas, I'm Howard Balzer. Have a good night, everybody, and Cardinals at it once again Sunday against the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, let me click end broadcast.